Believe it or not, every castle has more than one entry. There's the grand ornate entry designed to impress guests and royalty. And then there are the other entrances for staff or for servicing the castle. You have to bring in supplies, you have to bring in building materials. This castle has 4 entries. Really 5 to include the hatch to the basement. The funny thing is, technically, the door that we use every day to come in and out of the castle is not the front entry. That is on the other side of the castle, and that is my next project. Here's the front of the castle. I'll do a little sweep up and down, and that's the door that I'm going to try to renovate. The door was installed in 1730 from the best we can tell, so it is the original door. It was last renovated in 1990, so it has not had any type of maintenance or updates in over 30 years. You can see the door has a lot of intricate woodwork. Over the years, it's built up a lot of dirt and corrosion. And what I did here was actually take a little test shot and see what it would look like once you peeled back all of the corrosion and dirt. There's actually wood underneath it. It looked pretty nice. But this is going to be a big job, and it's going to take all my skills to figure out how to make this door look as good as it did when it was first installed, or at least better than it looks now. So you may be asking yourself, why don't we use this cool front entry to get into the castle? Well, decades ago, this castle was part of a much larger parcel of land, which included this farmhouse, which was here before the castle and is actually older than the castle and faces into this courtyard. Over the decades, the land has been parceled out, so most of this land belongs to the farmer. So most of the improvements were made on the side that we own, which is on the other side of the castle. The other challenge with this door is that it faces to the west, where all the prevailing winds and major storms come in, so it just gets brutalized. And at least like a sieve, wind blows through the sides here. They tried to weather strip it, but I'm going to try to redo that. Water comes in too, so as part of this renovation, I need to figure out how to make this door a little more weatherproof. I sanded one of the panels down. You can see here it looks pretty good. You usually knock the big stuff off with this sander tied to this drill. It really does a great job of getting the gross level stuff off. And then I go at it with 60 grit sandpaper. But man, I am running up against this stuff. I think it's old lacquer. It is so strong, the drill can't get it off. Even when you hand sand it, you get down so far into the wood that it's not worth it. So I think I'm going to leave that, and I'll just give the door kind of that antique feeling, which it is old, so I think that'll work out. After a couple days of sanding and fixing the door, I've got one door essentially finished, the one on the left. It's looking pretty good, but man, you can tell the age of this door once you get all that crust off. It really brings out the grains, and also just get a sense of how old this door is. There's a lot of intricate woodwork in here as well. So I had to fill some holes, I had to screw some pieces in that were extremely loose, but that is what it is looking like. Now I have to do the other side, and you kind of see that's what it was originally. That's what it looks like when it was sanded off, and that's what it looks like when we refinish it. Here's an example of one of the wood panels I had to pull out of the door because it was so badly broken here. It had buckled. You can tell at one time they tried to repair it with these wood splints, but over time the elements have just had their way with this door panel, and the whole thing just kind of buckled outwards. So what I did is I flattened it, glued it, stained it, and then I'm going to attempt to push it back into the slot that it was in the door. So as often happens when I work on these projects, especially things that are this old, when you tend to fix one thing, you either create new problems or exacerbate an existing problem. So the door was already warped before, and you can see here, it looks pretty not so warped here. It's actually pretty close, but what has happened, because I've tightened everything up, it's made the warp far worse on the bottom here. So I have this huge gap where wind and rain can blow through, which I'm trying to fix. To try and address the warp in the door, I created this bracket for the top of the door. Its purpose is to keep the top of this door from moving any further forward than what that bracket will allow. That then lets me work on the bottom of the door without having to worry about the top of the door trying to warp outward. To try and address the warp in the bottom of the door, I created this solid oak wood plate that I then attached this doorstop to. The idea here is that I can put pressure on the bottom of the door, put the doorstop down, and it'll be constant pressure. The hope here is that over the weeks and months that this is in place, that it will slowly push that warp forward and reduce that gap that you see. I don't think it'll ever be flush, but it will get less over time is my hope. But before I could do any of this, I had to deal with a severe amount of dry rot that was in this corner of the door. Because of the years that the wind and rain and moisture had been allowed to get through this corner, that whole corner had dry rotted out. I had to gouge out this entire area, and as you can see, to the point where light was actually coming through the door. I then applied a bunch of fungicide to try to kill any of the remaining spores and dry rot fungus that was in there. I then created this wood structure to try and fill the gap for the amount of material I had taken out. My next step then was to take that wood plank with some wax paper between it and that wood structure I'd built, and then squirt in building foam essentially in that front hole that you saw, the light coming through, to fill in the entire gap and to prevent any further moisture from getting into the door. The remaining problem I still had to deal with was the fact that until that door warp is reduced, I still have this big gap through which wind and water can still blow through. So to create a custom seal for the center portion of this door, what I did is I wrapped the edge of this door in wax paper, closed it, then I squirt that same building foam into the seam, and what happens, it expanded into the gap uniformly across, no matter what the depth, creating basically a custom seal over that entire center of the door. That prevents any wind or water from getting in. Now when I close the door, it forms a custom seal that you can't even see unless you look at the side, but you can see that prevents any type of moisture or wind to blow through. So after multiple days of filling, sanding, disassembling, reassembling, and repairing the door, here's the final result. As long as this door gets a fresh coat of stain every couple of years, it can easily last another 100 years. I still need to address the cowling on the top, but it's starting to get cold here, and I think I'm going to wait until spring to address that one. It's lasted this long, I'm sure it can last one more winter. Believe it or not, every castle has more than one entry. There's the grand ornate entry designed to impress royalty and guests and stuff. The funny thing is, the doors that we use every day to come inside of, there's the ornate entry that's used to impress. The funny thing is, that front entry, believe it or not, every castle has more than one entry. There's a grand ornate entry designed to impress royalty and shit.